Hello, and welcome back to another edition of Making Work Work. My name is Chris Thornton. I'm an executive and career coach, and I help people to love what they do, whether that's finding their dream career or helping businesses to create great places that people want to work. Now, one of the things I am really passionate about is flexible working because it's one of the things that a lot of people have found to be an absolute lifesaver during COVID. And I think hopefully that trend is set to continue. Now, I love working with people that have similar passions. And my guest today, I'm super excited because we've got a different slant on flexible working for you today. I'm interviewing Ian Dinwiddy of Inspiring Dads. Now, Ian, former management consultant, did some freelancing for several years and supported his wife even as a full-time dad to support her busy legal career, and now finds himself as a coach and a mentor to support dads and businesses in both the return to work and adapting to fatherhood and exploring how they can be a great dad and have a great career. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning, Chris. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. I understand you're getting back into, when Ian's not doing coaching, he is an umpire for field hockey at one of the highest levels. And I know because my own husband plays field hockey, that the season is about to start. How is that going for you, Ian?
Well, I did a preseason game, and then last weekend, actually, I didn't umpire. I was an umpire coach. So I was an umpire coach candidate at the weekend. So I had an umpire coach with me, Dawn, who has previously coached me as an umpire, and this time we were watching the game together. So we were watching, that was a South Prem Division 1 game.
Oh, fab.
So so we did that, and I've got a game, Indian Gymkhana versus Trojans.
Ooh,
it's my next game on Saturday. So
that should be excellent.
Yeah, this time I'm blowing the whistle rather than watching people blow the whistle.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, Ian, look, how did you go from being a management consultant to being a coach for dads and businesses? Can you kind of take us through that story?
Yeah, it goes back 10 or 11 years really now. My daughter was born in January 2010. But before that, my wife and I, Lisa and I, we had the conversations about how we were going to structure our life when children came along. And best will in the world as a consultant, I was, majority of the work that I was doing was away from home, maybe 4 days a week, 3 days a week. There was no consistency around sort of my schedule and what you could kind of commit to, which is great when you're just a couple, but when you're considering how you're going to factor in children, then we knew yeah, exactly. We knew we needed to do something differently. Lisa's hours location consistently in London, but her hours, long hours, especially into the evenings. And if I was working away, then it just, there would be a real struggle for us, especially considering we don't have grandparents nearby or anything, any sort of family support structures to build upon. So I guess we had some pretty frank conversations early on in terms of what our family objectives were going to be, and ultimately it was about one of us who was always going to be there for children, whether we had one, whether we had two. I mean, I think at this stage maybe we knew we knew number one was on the way, I guess, when we had this sort of conversation. Maybe it was earlier than that, but for as long as I can remember, we took the view that both on a sort of short-term and a long-term financial basis and on a practicality of future work, it was better for me to step back from my career as a consultant and for Lisa to carry on. And at some stage, then I would stop work altogether. That was the plan. So I gave my notice in. I was working for a change management group, who I still work for now as a freelancer, and I handed in my notice, I think about 9 months before I was due to finish.
Wow. Okay.
And I said to Julia, who was my boss, I said, this is what we want to do. When Freya's born, actually we didn't know she was called Freya, but she's called Freya. But at the time, we couldn't have had that conversation because we obviously weren't talking about what her name would be. But when my baby's born, I want to go to 4 days a week. And then in mid-June, I'm going to stop altogether. And I'm giving you advance notice, and hopefully we can work out something that works for the business and all the rest of it. And so it went from there initially. I had a couple of weeks paternity leave, worked 4 days a week, and then I stopped altogether. And I became a full-time stay-at-home dad for 9 months initially. Wow. And then Freya was in nursery 2 days a week. 3 days before she was due to go into nursery, I got a call from Julia again saying, piece of project work based over in Amsterdam.
Oh,
Are you
wow.
able to do it? I said, well, I can do 2 days a week. She said, that might work. And it did. So I worked a couple of days a week. I was able to go early to Amsterdam, come back, do the nursery pickup at 6 o'clock. And I did that 4 times. And I
Wow.
didn't miss a nursery pickup.
That is impressive.
It was a bit edgy sometimes, but didn't, and it sort of showed what was
It's possible.
what's possible to do if
Yeah.
you're just kind of, this is what I can do, let's see what we can fit around it. So then I carried on sort of freelancing on a 2-3 day a week basis for both my former businesses that I worked for. And then kind of the realization was that it wasn't a sustainable way of doing things. It was restricted to being able to ultimately pick up children. We were mindful of the school hours, which, rather than being an 8 till 6, it's 3 o'clock pickup. So we thought about that, and I was really looking for something that I could do that would be long-term viable as a career. Lisa was involved in a management women's leadership management training course through her work, and she was receiving coaching, and she mentioned it. She said, it's this coaching stuff, this thing that I'm going through, this experience, so it seems a lot like the sort of things and the approach that you really enjoy from consultancy. Maybe there's something in it. And then it turned out I knew coaches. I'd worked with someone who then become a coach, and I sat down with her a couple of times and picked her brains, and then I knew it was something that fitted really nicely with how I like to work in terms of my experience as a consultant previously. Kind of knew I could have control of my own hours, my own destiny. So I went for it. I went on the Coaching Academy 2-day course that I think you must have been on as well, Chris.
Absolutely, and had that light bulb moment. It's like, right, this is it.
Yeah, I already knew I wanted to pay to train, but it just reinforced it. And there were a couple of the big light bulb moment for me was realizing that I was judging my success quite narrowly against a small number of people on LinkedIn who were my friends, hockey mates, university friends, who were, in my view, doing really well. And so I was concerned that my version of success wasn't their version of success. And I realized that wasn't doing me any favors. And it's something that comes up in coaching
I was going to
quite
say,
frequently.
it must be a common theme for a lot of dads, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It definitely comes up. It comes up time and time again, this sense of status and comparison, but also the fact that it's quite a narrow perspective, is that we tend to cherry pick the ones we're comparing, the people we're comparing ourselves against, without looking at the entirety of everyone, and everyone's journey is different, and reflect perhaps on what's important to them and to their families versus what's important to you. So there's a lot of, so that was a real light bulb moment for me. So I cracked on with training in amongst looking after number 2. So Struan's 7 now, and Freya's 10.
Oh wow!
So I had the lead for that, and then we were mixing and matching kind of training with a couple of days where they were both at nursery at the same time. A couple of days where one of them was and one of them wasn't, and just threw myself into things like baby swimming and monkey music and all sorts of exciting kids activities.
So listen, can I just ask you, so how did you find that as a dad, going to a lot of activities that, let's be honest, typically are mainly women there? So what kind of reception did you get?
I think those activities, they're really important to embrace and make the most of them. I think I found that I was relatively unusual amongst the peer group of dads that I knew who were being solo dads, who are primary carers. I used to travel across, we're in southeast London here. I used to go across southwest London, used to meet up with a friend of mine who's a police officer, and he had flexible working patterns and that sort of thing. We used to meet up, and then I used to go on to a dad's group that ran a couple of days a week over in Wimbledon.
Oh, right. Okay.
What I found was that a lot of the men in that group were slightly apprehensive, quite nervous about interacting in what they
Women's
perceived to be
groups.
mums groups. Yeah, women's groups,
Yeah.
mums groups. It was all
Yeah.
because it's advertised, it's
Oh yeah,
advertised
it's
as
all
mums and babies. It's
NC.
all mummies and babies and all this
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
And for me, I didn't really care. I have a lot of very good female friends. I've worked in female dominated organizations. I worked in a sales team, I think, in publishing, where I was the only man of 14 in the team. I just it never really concerned me that I'd have to have one-to-one conversations with women that I wasn't related to in some way. It was just like it was just parenting, really. But I knew a lot of men really struggle with that. So they would
Yeah.
go a whole day without really speaking to anyone or interacting, and then they
Oh.
would come to the dad's group, and they would be amongst other men, and they could have these different type of conversations.
Mm.
But a lot of them were quite apprehensive, and were quite limiting how they the opportunities to interact with other parents. Whereas I just
Wow.
kind of plowed on, really, I think.
Wow. See, but that took a lot of courage, didn't it? And it sounded like obviously you had a supportive boss when you initially, made the change. But you're right. So many men probably they may not have a supportive boss, or obviously, as you say, they go along to these things, and there's a certain level of apprehension and lots of
Yeah.
comparison. That we're hearing lots of things just even coming out of your conversation, which I think are challenges that are probably common to a lot of men that you that you coach.
But also the important thing, Chris, I think, is that there are also challenges for mums as well, because
Exactly.
those groups quite quickly become quite cliquey. There are groups of that. I used to go along to these groups, and it was quite funny. So monkey music was a great example. I know we're going from a little bit of a tangent here, but we used to sit in a semicircle, and then the teacher was in the middle and had the pink monkey, and then the kids interacted with the pink monkey and it danced and all this kind of thing. Brilliant. Monkey music. I can't speak highly enough of monkey music and all the teachers, as you can probably tell. I used to sit in different places. So I would sit, one week I'd sit in that place, and one week I'd sit here. I would do it deliberately to mess up the structures, because every single other parent, and it was almost always women, they would always sit next to their friends, and they would always sit
Oh
in the
wow.
same
Hey,
places and speak to the
that's
same people, and they almost
wow.
wouldn't interact with each other. So I used to, it kind of
That's
feels a bit
mad,
cruel.
isn't
It
it?
almost seems cruel now, in a sense. I used to deliberately sit in different places to force them to adapt, to maybe do things slightly different and sit next to someone they didn't usually sit next to. I mean, you're not doing a lot of talking within monkey music, you're not supposed to, but
Yeah.
I thought it was important to kind of ruffle things up and just change things around, because I could see that I didn't really have a clique in that group. I didn't know any of the mums from any other place. Everyone else had come as a pair or as a three.
Mm.
They weren't going on their own to do things. And I've always been one of those, whether I once joined a hockey club where I knew no one just because I wanted to play hockey, and, I could sit around waiting for someone I knew to join a club, or I could go and
Or you
join in,
could
and
just
everyone else
go
follow
and
me.
go
I could just go
do
and
it.
do it, and everyone else, and then it turns out 5 or 6 mates, oh, where are you playing? Oh yeah, I'll come and play as well. Yeah, oh, it's good. So perhaps that's quite personal to me, but I think men and women struggle with solo parenting and doing it on your own.
Mm.
And the more you can tap into, more you can tap in and create networks and be proactive. I think it's better for everyone, really.
Yeah. So, I mean, just kind of talk me through this, because I've been reading a few of your blogs and listening to some of your podcasts. Ian does a Lockdown Dads podcast with the co-host James Miller.
Miller, yeah.
Yeah, Miller. And there's a lot of you've got quite a lot of focus here around gender equality. Now, this is interesting because we tend to think so often around a lot of these parenting and childcare issues and the whole flex issue as being like a women's issue, and women have all these, which obviously that was one of the reasons that I ended up being a stay-home mom myself, to be fair. It was partially an economic decision. It was who was making the most money at the time and who could, who was kind of best suited, I suppose, to looking after these two boys that we have. And so you make those choices, but it's quite limiting, isn't it? And so what you've been exploring in a lot of the conversations you've been having is this idea that, we should be looking at this as a parenting issue. It shouldn't be a working mom's issue or even a working dad's issue. And actually, women need kind of an advocate as well. And men are stressed out trying to kind of, keep their head down and get on with the, meeting all these expectations so that they can keep their jobs. And so just kind of talk me through, what do you think the impact of some of this is in terms of gender equality? Let's unpack that first.
Yeah, I think from an equality angle, I think that the important thing to remember is that it's very easy to assume that men don't have caring responsibilities, or don't have a desire to look after and be actively involved in their kids'
Parenting.
lives. Yeah,
Mm,
parenting really, and I guess it's an historical thing. I don't think we have to go back we only have to go back a generation to
mm.
find that men were slightly, they were slightly separated from family life. It was, you go back, my parents, my dad went out to work. My mum did some childminding work. She did some piecemeal work. I remember making boxes, like gluing boxes together. It was like this production line in the house, but it was work in the home,
Mm.
rather than going out to work. And a new generation of dads often reflect within sort of coaching sessions, and it's not just my coaching sessions. We had a lady called Mary Williams on our show a couple of weeks ago, and she raised it as well, is that men talk about the dads they don't really remember being present in their lives, and they want
Wow.
to be a different type of dad.
Yeah.
But we butt up in society and in the workplace. We kind of clash with a generation of male leaders who are of that age where they were when they were young men. The
Dad was
choice,
off at work.
dad was out of work and went all in for work, committed to that, and that's how they did things.
Yeah.
And so some of the challenges you have within the workplace is that senior male leadership don't necessarily understand how the perception and the beliefs have changed for a younger generation.
Yeah.
And it's so important to break these assumptions, because it doesn't, assuming that men don't have responsibilities or don't want to be involved in parenting, leads to those men who do want to be involved, of which we know there's a significant, probably it's still a minority, but a significant minority would want to change things, maybe earn a little bit less money, change their kind of family trajectory, so that maybe both parents can have the opportunity to work. Because if best will in the world, if a man is I say out to work, I mean, it's a bit of a moot point at the moment, but
It is.
if a man is expected to work 45, 50 hours a week and commute, then somebody has, yeah. And if you're in a couple, somebody, or even if you're not in a couple, somebody has to look after the children.
That's
if
it.
you have children.
Yes.
And if the man is feeling like he has to, or the conversations within the couple aren't taking place to say, actually, we can do things differently, we can step back from it. If we're not communicating, we're not looking at what we really want, it's much harder in a heterosexual relationship for the person, any relationship really, and none equally, for the person looking after the children to be able to access paid work, because there are limitations around when school pickups are, when childminder pickups. And so we create this sort of this system where we don't give opportunities for dads to necessarily be the type of father they want to be, the father they don't remember growing up. But equally, we create this kind of straitjacket around women who find it much harder to engage in work in the same way as, perhaps, say, man's got 50 hours free, and then the woman who's competing may only have 40 hours, because actually she's got a lot of other things that really couples should be sharing, and being much more equitable about what they do in the home, which would create benefits for the workplace, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, just talk to me a little bit about, what do you think the impact of this is on just mental health as a whole? Because obviously, I mean, there was some statistics I was reading in some of the articles that you've written in terms of, discrimination, and how stressed out, dads in particular, I mean, obviously mums as well, but dads in particular, sort of 80% of dads feel this need to just kind of be like this rock for their family. And sort of 72% of these dads are sort of close to burnout, and they face, not only the anxiety of trying to juggle being a great dad and being there, present for their family and their wife as well as their kids, but also the concern and the worry that, actually they're going to be, sort of discriminated against at work, or even demoted, or, at worst, or maybe at best, I should say, maybe a few jibes or awkward comments, but at worst, potentially even let go or demoted.
Yeah, I think it's it does have that effect, because I think because of the nature of the gender pay gap, we tend to assume that if you've got a man and a woman in maybe their 20s, the assumption, it's quite easy to assume that the man won't be able to take leave. I mean, he might be entitled to a couple of weeks leave, whereas the woman might take 6 months out. You start to and won't want flexible working because, hey, dads don't want flexible working. We start to create a gender pay gap already, and so when children come along, still in a majority of households, the man will be earning more if it's a heterosexual relationship. Should we just pause that while my phone rings out? Can you hear my phone, Chris, or not?
Okay, sorry. So you were saying?
Yeah, so I think the challenge is that we create gender pay gaps there, and so within a heterosexual relationship, then when children come along, then it's more likely the man is already earning more, and therefore the calculations within a relationship are the man needs to work. But it gets wider and wider, because then the man's earning more money, the majority of the money, perhaps the sole breadwinner, and they really feels the pressure of providing, and what happens if I don't get the promotion, what happens here. And that can be really, really damaging. The men are really struggling. Like you said, that statistic, that 80%, it's an Australian survey, about 80% of men feeling like they had to be the rock. It's not conducive to then opening up and having open and honest conversations, first with yourself as an individual, and then as a couple, and then involving your workplace in terms of what do we really want to achieve, what are our goals, as a couple, who do we want to be as a family, what do we want to be, what do we want to do, and what do we want to have, and use that as a template to say, actually, how much money do we actually need to achieve our objectives. And I think if we can start to reframe that, couples get a little bit, they get better communication, they improve their relationship from that point of view, and you start to get things which are, start to really kind of achieve that kind of equity, that everyone gets what they want. And it may be the man actually quite fancies working 4 days a week, and his wife wants to work 5 days a week, and she doesn't like looking after kids, and maybe that works better. But I think not enough couples have those conversations, the type of conversations that, without sounding smug, the type of conversations that Lisa and I kind of had before Freya was born, in terms of what our life was going to look like. Very practical conversations about finances and equity and how you're going to do things, because it's, we end up with mental health challenges that actually and crises that perhaps if we were more mindful of the pressures early on and start to open up those lines of communication, maybe we wouldn't have such disappointing, sad statistics around men's mental health and maybe young men's suicide. I mean, there's a lot going on within those statistics, but I think if we're more mindful about mental health and well-being and how work-life balance, which I know work-life balance isn't a perfect term, but I think a lot of people understand what it kind of means.
They understand the concept, I think. Yeah. I mean, I mean, hopefully what we should have is we shouldn't really have to, even just the idea of work and life almost implies that one is sort of better than the other. Really, you're sort of doing the work to have the life. It's like, well, it actually should be an integrated whole, ideally.
Absolutely.
But obviously there is a whole knock-on effect to this, because although we think, men just sort of they just kind of go back to work and they just kind of get on with it. Actually, I mean, from an employer's point of view, there's actually a massive cost to ignoring this, isn't there? Because we get mental health issues, we get burnout, we get, people just don't, even the people that are there at work. I mean, how effective and productive do you think someone can be, especially a new dad, for example, who's probably getting no sleep, is under, all this stress and pressure to, obviously perform and be the breadwinner and wants to have a great career and wants to do well, but also equally, knows that as soon as he comes home, oh my God, if I don't get this train, or if I'm not back by X time, wife's like desperate. I remember my own experience, when my husband would come in, like, oh my God, great, he's back, and hand these kids over to him that I've been with all day that are like tearing my hair out. And, so there's no break, when you come home as a dad, and just the impact that all of this has on, families as a whole, and obviously the children and the next generation that we raise. So, I mean, we can't ignore this. I mean, from a work point of view, it is worth it for businesses to allow us to have great families, isn't it?
It is. It is. It's that sense of men are very good at compartmentalizing their
Yeah.
lives and
Yeah.
for going to work and not taking home life with them or not appearing to,
Mm.
but it builds up. And I think it's really, really important to engage with new dads, you know, almost as, yeah, whether it's off the back of 2 weeks of leave, off the back of 6 months of leave in those businesses that provide kind of equalized parental leave, is to have have opportunity to talk to another dad and to be mentored and to not force them to talk about the circumstances, talk about how they feel about the transition from being in a couple and now being in a family. And I think that certainly that first time is really, really important to engage with men and give them almost force them to talk about things and
Mm.
not just to kind of get their
Sweep it
head
under the
down, work
carpet.
hard, yeah, work hard, all the rest of it, and taking the stress. I mean, I felt it when Freya was little. She had quite severe reflux,
Mm.
certainly until we kind of got the right kind of medicine and all the rest of it under control. But she would, so during the day, she was a real screamer, and she would scream and scream, and
Oh,
she hurt when she fed, and all these kind of things.
oh, that's
And
hard.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so you were saying how Freya, she had quite severe reflux when she was born.
Yeah, so I used to phone at lunchtime. I was only doing 4 days a week. I was doing 4 days a week, and I had a flexible fifth day. So I was at home more than a lot of dads would be at that stage. But I remember the stress and the kind of anticipation and the worry about that phone call at lunchtime. You know, I'd go for how's it going kind of thing, and
Mm.
how, you know, that would fundamentally affect my state of mind and my sense of well-being would be what Lisa would tell me about how they'd been getting on. uh, and you know, she didn't sleep. She was great at sleeping at night, not during the day at all, and she was in a lot of pain and discomfort, certainly,
Oh.
so early on. So I really felt that pressure and that stress of something that I couldn't control and help with, and
Mm.
yet I had I had the afternoon essentially
Mm.
for working through it. And then later on, you know, what you were saying before, Chris, in terms of that timing of getting home. You know, I was taking the train out of London Bridge to get home, and I had a target train.
Yep.
Uh, and therefore I had an expected time. We knew how long the train would take, and we knew
Yep.
how long it would take for me to walk from the station. So there
Yep.
was a time where I would walk through the door. That
Yep.
was the plan.
Yep.
However, I couldn't always do that.
No.
Things would happen. However, when I realized how important that was, the right train, and when I walked through the door, and
Yeah.
how much of a mental health impact and well-being, just that 15-minute difference, which we're really talking about, maybe half an hour if there were two trains, but really a lot of the time, just that 15-minute difference at the end of the day made such a big difference to, to how Lisa felt about the day and the end of the day. And she
Yeah.
really looked forward to having someone else to be able to, you know, share some of this burden
Mm.
with a baby who was, you know, not struggling exactly, but was quite
Having
emotionally
difficulties.
challenged. Yeah, it's just, it's like when they're that painful kind of cry, and it's not,
Mm.
that
And
sort of
it's gut
distress.
wrenching.
Exactly. And once I knew about that train and the importance of getting the right train, then obviously it focused my mind very, very clearly on this was a non-negotiable about when I was leaving work, and whatever needed to be picked up later could be picked up later, but this is what I was going to do. And I knew
Mm.
exactly why I was going to do it. I think that's a really important thing for, you know, coming back on that communication is why do we do what we do? Let's
Mm.
just not kind of go on and keep on a treadmill. Let's, you know, let's take a step backwards as a couple, as a family, and say, actually, what's important? Why do we do things? And do we need to make changes to
Mm.
make it work for everyone
For both of
within
you.
the
Yeah.
relationship? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think too often, certainly from my coaching experience, too often then couples are, men are siloing up a little bit. They're focused
Ah.
on they tend to be focused on their work direction, and potentially or possibly a hobby that they like doing, and they need to be mindful of the bigger picture, making sure everything's joined up. because
Yeah.
it will catch you out, and that's how, and relationship pressures will build and build. And there are plenty of men in their 50s, mid 50s, who look back and reflect, and there's some quite poignant
There's some regrets, I
articles.
think.
Regrets, yeah, absolutely. Looking back and saying, actually, I wish I'd been more involved, because now I'm slightly detached from family life. Yes, we've got this great house, but the commute's long. If I'm commuting, I've got to keep working because I can't afford not to. And we've built this life that's dependent on me
On
carrying on
doing,
doing something that
yeah,
actually I fell out of love with a while ago. And perhaps if we'd been more open and honest, we could have a
could have
better
done something
relationship.
different. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I don't want men to look back and regret the choices that they made and say, actually, well, I should have done something different. I want to help men now to understand how to be a great dad and have a great career at the same time. A lot of it does come down to the communication side of things.
Yeah. So tell me, so like when you are working with dads, what do men overwhelmingly say they want? I'm hearing a lot of common themes kind of weaving through here, but if you were to kind of distill that down into like 2 or 3 things that you hear the most often from the men that you coach, what do they say?
A lot of it is about personal purpose, I would say. So
Okay.
it's about creating, well, it depends. I mean, if we're talking about paternity coaching, which is what I do quite a lot of sort of within a corporate environment in terms of return to work, then it's about survival initially, actually.
Wow.
It's about
Strong word.
survival. Yeah. It's about survival. It's about processing. It's surviving in terms of relationship. It's about processing what's going on so that they can be the best husband, partner, worker that they can be. And it's about bringing together these themes that are putting them under pressure. Often there's a piece around the transition when their partners go back to the workplace, go back
Yeah.
to work, and how are we going to set up our lives to look after our children? Who's going to do, I've done stuff around nursery run planning. Which day is the best day for nursery? Who's going to do nursery pickup or drop off? When are they going to do it?
The
A lot of kind of quite
logistics.
practical things, and actually, and that feeds into flexible working because of the timings and all these sort of things. So flexible working being the enabler of their partners to be able to pursue the career that they want to. So it's the equality, men's flexible working does unlock the equality piece.
Yes. Yes.
And then at the other end, and then slightly later on, if you've got children who are perhaps, preschool age, that sort of age, then, which is the other sort of sweet spot, I guess, is we've come out of that survival mode and coping mode, and now we're looking ahead and we're saying, okay, children are okay. We've got an understanding of where they might go to school, all these kind of things.
Yeah.
Now it's about
Getting into the whole school process is nerve-wracking, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. And the
And
timings,
we won't go there, but
yeah, nursery. When you get used to 8 till 6, and it all changes.
Or getting into a school. That's the other thing. Getting
Getting
into
into
the
school.
school that you'd like them to be in. Yeah.
All those kind of factors that perhaps I know that men lag behind their partners in terms of thinking about these things. Hopefully I'm better than that. It's not perfect still in this house. Lisa does a lot of, Lisa's on the front foot a little bit more on those sort of things. But a lot of it becomes about personal purpose. So got young children, kind of gone through the survival mode. We've kind of coped with that stage of things. These children can do more and more things independently. What is it about, what's my impact? What's my long-term impact as a man within work or within family? And tapping, really sort of taking it back to, actually, I came out of school or university and I've done this type of job, and maybe I've jumped around a little bit. I worked with someone who was an officer in the Royal Navy, and he'd been posted abroad, done lots of different jobs. Came back in, transferable skills, and looking to find his sweet spot. So amazing skills over here in terms of the being an officer in the Royal Navy, and now actually what is he was looking for. What's my sweet spot? Where's my direction? What is it that I can do that I can create value in the world? Alongside, I've got these children. I'm not gonna. I'm not going to just go and follow my career sort of willy-nilly. I've done that before, but
Yeah.
now how do I make it work on a long-term basis? There's
Yeah.
a lot of kind of purpose, clarity of direction, I think, is the
Right.
main theme that comes through it. Maybe some of it is kind of revisiting some of the revisiting relationship, in terms of we've had quite a stressful 2-3 years in terms of young children, and reconnecting, and that comes up as well.
So
But I would say a lot of purpose.
how do you support dads to do that? Because I know you use disc profiling to help with the communication skills. I
Yeah.
mean, how do you use that to help them sort of have better conversations, really?
So disc, initially I use disc with the clients themselves. So in terms of it's really, really useful for me to understand what kind of personal preference someone might have in a sort of day-to-day. Are they outgoing? Are they data-driven? Are they do they have a preference around teamwork? And are they a get-it-done type of person? Because then as a coach, I can, it's very easy for me to coach people who have the same profile as me.
Sure, yeah.
I'm a CS. I can coach SC all day long, and I've got a client I've worked with. I don't know. We must have done that over the last 4 or 5 years. We must have done 12, 14, 15 sessions. I don't know. We do a group of them and then we stop. But we operate in the same way. We think in the same way. We have the same kind of preference about how to do things, the speed about how to do things. But DISC is really, really interesting, because then it allows me to understand how to best help an individual. So so the classic one, someone with a high I profile, it's quite useful to help them to tap into some of the C that they might not do. So more data orientated. So sometimes a high I, very big picture, very driven. If we can help to fill it, as a coach, I can help them to
fill in the detail.
Fill in the detail. So they've got a little bit, they don't want too much detail. And I know they don't want the detail, but they need a little bit of detail.
Yeah.
So I can help them. I know I know how they're likely to approach a challenge, and therefore how I can best help them to be that best version of themselves. And then in terms of couples, I have a product where I walk through how to profile someone, essentially, which sounds more kind of Big Brother than it actually is. But it's being aware of how someone likes to operate, and therefore you'll find in any relationship, whether it's work or sort of personal relationship, that people have different preferences, and sometimes opposites attract. Actually, within DISC, what you tend to find is that opposites wind each other up, but they do if they're very similar as well. So if you've got two high Ds, for instance, they just want to be in charge. There's two people who want to be in charge.
I can see a conflict already.
Exactly. So two high Ds, a couple of S's are just like, they're just in the numbers. Anyway, so there is a product where I help people to understand their partner's preferences and what their preferences are, and how blends work, and therefore how best to influence people. Because this is what it fell out of. I do it from a couple's point of view, but it fell out of workshops for management consultants who are on a client site without direct line responsibility for individuals who they're trying to influence, but starting to coaching them to recognize the profiles that they are seeing in front of them gives them an opportunity to get things done within a workplace. So if and also understanding how someone is normally, and what happens when they're under pressure. So when the bad numbers come in, the weekly numbers are particularly bad, then understanding that key stakeholder, client stakeholder, is going to react in a different way to what you expect is really, really important to understand how to then help them and use your consultancy skills and put it through a prism, I guess, and filter it so that you can help influence them and get things done that they need to do. But if you go about it in the wrong way, and if you're there's no point messaging a high, talking to a high I, when as if your natural tendency is a C, if you're not tapping into the fact that someone with an I preference will want to be energy, direction, big picture, less about the detail.
Bit more personal touch, perhaps.
You've got to know that that's who they are. Try and pull them back in a little bit, but you've got to work with who they are, and I think that goes for couples as well. Is that understanding preferences can help to explain some of the tensions that you may have
Yeah.
within a relationship because of the way you want to communicate and the way you like to find things out. The classic one is that some there are plenty of managers who right will call a meeting, and the meeting is meetings in 10 minutes, everyone come to the meeting, and that's fine for their preference, and they probably quite enjoy a snap meeting.
Yep.
Half their staff
Are going,
will be going,
no,
no
what are we
way.
doing? Yeah.
I don't have the information. I don't, I used to happen in consultancy. Used to be like, what's the number? It's like, well, I think I'll know the number. Yeah, I'm a couple of hours away from giving you the number. No, what do you think the number is now? I'm not going to give you the number now because I haven't done the work. I'm not confident in the number. I want to take that extra time. So I'd be, snap meetings no good for me. You can't book in my diary more than 24 hours in advance, for instance.
So this could be a useful tool, obviously, within businesses as well, couldn't it? In terms of even having those conversations with your manager or your team, and obviously working together more effectively as a team as well, couldn't it?
Yeah, it's a piece of work I'm actually exploring tomorrow, which we started doing pre-lockdown. And the conversation is going back to actually what profiling everyone and then seeing what the senior leadership looks like, and where is there a kind of group think going on? Does everyone work in the same way? Do we have an outlier? Do we have an outlier who feels like they're not part of the team because they don't react in the same way, they don't respond to things? Or how balanced are we? What's the people who actually make the decisions? What profile do they follow? How does that affect how that team interact? So that's a piece of work that we're restarting hopefully from tomorrow within a consultancy, senior leadership in a consultancy firm.
Oh, that's
so fascinating. I love DISC, as you can tell.
Oh, fantastic. And I mean, just kind of going back to this whole concept around the flexible work and that, I mean, what do you think gets in the way of men actually pursuing flexible work or taking it up even if it is offered?
I think men do take flexible working. I think that's one of the things that's really interesting, but I think they take it on an informal basis.
And kind of an ad hoc situation.
So if you ask men about their it's kind of pre-COVID, I think is, worth kind of saying pre-COVID, I think. If you ask men, a lot of businesses, men are working flexibly, but it's not formalized, and it's on a conversation with their boss. So they'll be taking time for Harvest Festival or school sports days, what I would call signature events.
Yeah.
That make them look like a hero to their kids, which is great because they showed up.
Yeah.
Daddy, why weren't you at sports day, kind of thing. Oh, next year I'll make sure I'm there. All the other dads are there. It's like those are the dads who are there, but they're doing it on that day, which is great. But what they aren't doing, because there's a certain degree, I think, of optionality around childcare, and they're just not pushing the boundary and saying, actually, I want 4 days a week, or at 4 o'clock every Thursday, I want to leave to be able to pick up my son and take him to football training, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And building that into the day-to-day way of working. So it's formalized, flexible working. And the best will in the world, that informal, flexible working is something that if you've got childcare or caring responsibilities more generally, that's just no good for anyone. So what happens is that I think in a lot of workplaces, it's flexible working is seen as for mums often. However, there are lots and lots of men who are being flexible, but it's not really helping anyone in there, and it's not helping the business because it's not showing everyone that actually men work flexibly too. Therefore, flex isn't just something for women, and actually everyone wants this, everyone's accessing it because it's under the radar. And I think that's really important for men to show that kind of leadership. Leave loudly, I think, is an expression.
I like that. Yeah.
Chief exec of PepsiCo, I think, has got a really good reputation for leaving the business loudly and saying, "I'm the chief exec, and it's 5 o'clock, and I'm leaving, and I'm going to do this," and showing and demonstrating a different way of working, because we need to move the dial away from things that are seen just as for women, because men don't feel like they can access it, and it becomes and the assumption is that women will, and therefore that's also a drag in terms of equality of opportunity within the workplace. So
would it be safe to say that one of the ways that we obviously could, leading into how does this benefit businesses by having men who are able to take flexible working options and obviously, support their families and have a better work-life balance and mental health. Would it be safe to say that we need more role models? Really, we need more leaders. There was a great story, I think it was in one of your blogs, about Bill Gates, that he started driving his daughter to school, and how suddenly all these other people from Microsoft started driving their kids to school because someone like that, someone obviously quite a significant figure, was effectively sending the message that it was okay to be a parent, really. And we need more examples like that, don't we?
Yeah, I think it's so important to demonstrate male leadership. It's the no. I've seen surveys that where it comes out the number one reason that men don't take flexible working is because they don't see it being for them, and that what they do is they look up the pyramid, they look to their line managers, and they look to senior male leadership, and they say, if I want to be that person, what am I allowed to do?
Ooh, and I mean, even the word allowed, why are we treating people like they're children at work as opposed to adults? This is
that's
crazy,
a whole different,
isn't it?
that's a whole different
I mean, that's a whole different
conversation.
conversation. It is. I mean, one of the, because I know you spoke at Flexpo recently, and there was a great talk given by the FSCS, I'm trying to remember his name, and he was citing, that we're hopefully, with COVID, we're starting to move away from more of this sort of parent-child relationship within organizations to more of an adult organization, which is far healthier, isn't it?
David Blackburn, I want
David
to
Blackburn,
say.
that was
Is that right? Have I got that right? Yeah.
I think that's right. Yeah.
We'll have to tag him.
Well, I will tag him in the post.
He was great. He was really, really good. Really,
It was a fantastic. It was a fantastic talk. Yeah, but I thought that was quite key, and just because it always amazes me. We spend our lives going through school, and we're desperate to get to kind of the next stage of life so that we can do what we want to do, and then we start jobs, and we actually don't have freedom in those jobs because people want us to be there at set times and places. Then they've even got spyware making sure that people are sat at their desk, and that doesn't guarantee they're doing any work, but it's just that perception that people are there, and the whole concepts around FaceTime and things like that are pretty outdated, really.
Yeah. I mean, there was a great example last year. I was a guest editor for the Dads at Work section of the Daddy Life website. And I think the first one I did was an interview that I'd recorded earlier in the summer with a man called Dominic, who is a partner in a law firm. And initially, when we wrote up his piece, he was Tom, the secret lawyer. And so we went live on Friday. And this is a man who worked 4 days a week as a partner in a law firm. But a majority of his clients didn't know that he was, the nature of his particular role meant he could respond to emails early in the morning and make calls early in the morning. It's an employment law. And so that was when his clients wanted him to be available. But what they didn't, and he was still available, but he actually didn't work and wasn't paid. He didn't take, he wasn't taking drawings for a fifth day. And on the Friday, when we went live with the article, he was Tom, the secret lawyer. And then over the weekend, he came back and he said, actually, this is absurd. This doesn't fit in with my values. This isn't why I'm doing it. I don't know why I'm concealing this. I'm hiding this. I've had conversations internally. We're going to turn it into a story.
Great.
And so Monday, we changed from Tom, the secret lawyer, to Dom.
His name. Oh,
yeah.
Fantastic.
So Dominic at Taylor Vinters he was outed as, he came out himself as, this is what I do. I'm a man, I work 4 days a week, I'm a partner in a law firm, and now I'm telling everyone. And it was such a great, such an important, thing to explore and to share, because it matters so much.
It does. And I've spoken to a few people recently around the idea of the 4-day work week. And there's quite a lot of evidence and data out there to back up, that how much more productive people are working a 4-day week, assuming of course that it is a 4 days and it's not you're trying to cram 5 days into 4, but absolutely.
Having human-sized jobs was what Jane Van Zyl from Working Families called it.
I love that. I love that idea. Yeah. So what, Ian, what can businesses do to support all this? I mean, obviously, hopefully it's fairly apparent by now through our interview that there's a huge benefit to businesses for looking at people as whole individuals, not sort of compartmentalizing, work and life and pretending that, people don't have a life outside of work. I think COVID has pretty much brought that home to us, the reality that people have lives, and actually you're far more likely to get more out of your people, and people are far more likely to be loyal and purposeful and engaged if you give them opportunities to balance work and life. So what are some of the things you feel employers can do to support this, particularly around this issue with dads inequality?
Yeah, I think the number one really important thing is to have jobs that are advertised as flexible working, not just
Mm,
open to flex, but actually describing how the job can be done flexibly, because I think that makes a massive difference. Whereas if you've got a job that is advertised as flexible and this is how you can do it flexibly, men will apply to those jobs saying, okay, that's the job, I'm going to go for it. If it's left as flex is open, they may just go for it, they'll go for the job, but they may not feel comfortable asking the
asking.
question because they
Mm,
haven't been given permission. The business isn't saying this is a flexible job, this is like, it's available,
mm,
what are you asking for it, kind of thing. And it changes the whole nature of the conversation.
mm.
Day one flexibility is a massive thing in terms of allowing people to change jobs as well and be able to get people in. So you're not going to get the best talent in your business. The best talent might want to work 4 days a week, and that would be absolutely fine. But if you're not advertising that that's available from the start, they're not going to leave their previous job where they've got it. Because at the moment, the way the law works is that you can't even ask for flexible working legally until 26 weeks has passed in the UK.
Yes, I've heard this. Yeah, and they can turn you down, and then if they turn you down, then you have to wait another
You can
year or something.
ask,
Yeah,
yeah,
which is absurd.
yeah, and all these mechanisms make it less likely that people who don't have to work flexibly, for whom it may be a choice or maybe culturally a choice, just don't access it. And therefore, it's a talent retention, it's a performance issue, it's a recruitment issue. The more that you can offer. I think LinkedIn Global Trends which was looking at recruiters. I think it was the UK part of that, said that something like 72%, 75% of recruiters in the UK said that flexible working was going to be the access to flexible working was going to be a really important part of getting good talent into the business and be able to offer things. And
It
the
makes
businesses who
sense.
get
Makes
ahead,
sense.
businesses who offer it will hoover up the
The-
talent, people who want
exactly.
to work differently. So
Well, and people
important.
that can work well, and also people that can work remotely, and not
Yeah,
just people that are working families, but even people that just have issues in general that they need a flexible working
yeah,
situation.
yeah,
Whether they're a carer, they have a disability,
yeah,
or the biggest thing I think is geography, because if people can work from anywhere, all of a sudden you massively open up the
yeah,
pool of talent that's available
yeah.
to you.
It democratizes everything. Actually, remote working is really powerful for diversity and inclusion, for, like you say, for a whole range of reasons, because you don't
Mm.
have to be physically there, and you don't have to factor the commute in. The job, it can be done in different places, and it just opens up we know there's enormous benefits for in terms of business performance for diverse workforces, and it's part of that conversation. But best will in the world, unlocking it seems counterintuitive, actually, to be honest. Dads are not they're not a protected group, and nor should they be. But I think it's
Mm.
important to understand that, given that 80% of men become fathers at some stage during their life,
It's pretty
focusing
significant.
it's a significant number, and it unlocks benefits for other groups. It changes the nature of the conversation about what success looks like in the workplace,
Yeah.
because success therefore it's not just, it's very male orientated. It's, a lot of businesses, it's male orientated, it's long hours culture. It ignores anything that's related outside of work, and it assumes that the individuals that get ahead don't have any other commitments, whether that's caring, whether it's children, or whether it's just social commitments and things they want to do differently.
Yeah, I mean, and besides besides advertising and offering a role that's flexible, I mean, what else do you think a business can do to support people? So it's obviously, because I know you offer paternity coaching
Yeah.
as part of the work that you do with organizations, and what other things can they do to support?
Yeah, so I think mentoring new dads within the workplace. Every dad should have a couple of hours of compulsory mentoring within the first, within a couple of weeks of coming back into the workplace, as a minimum. Whether
Mm.
that's with an external provider who, like myself, or whether that's internally with setting up a group of dads who are are there. They are, their kids are slightly older, but they have a perspective and they can talk about fatherhood and saying, right, because we talk about, a lot of coaching is focused around performance in the workplace.
Mm.
That's where the return on investment is. But I think there's also an enormous return on investment in terms of coaching and mentoring to make, to support men. There's quite a lot of support out there for maternity coaching. But I think
Mm.
equalizing that offer and treating parents as parents therefore changes the whole dynamic of the question. And it's good for performance and well-being and stress, and it takes away some of those pressures, or at least makes it more managed, makes those pressures of becoming a new father more manageable for the individuals involved.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And is there any advice that you'd give to dads as a whole in terms of just, you know, whether they have access to something like this or not? I mean, what are some just practical things that they could do to kind of manage, some of these issues better?
I think it's really important for men not to think they're the only one who feels like that,
Yeah.
and to be proactive in terms of building ally networks. So sometimes
Mm.
if you're looking, actually, if you're looking to find out how to position your flexible working request, actually, the mums in your department are probably the best allies you have in terms of knowing how to make it work. But
Mm.
tap into, don't just treat work as work. There are fathers everywhere around you,
Mm.
fathers with needs that they're making, that maybe they're doing on the side, and they're getting their flexible working that way, or maybe they're working flexibly anyway, they're working formally flexibly, you don't know about it. But getting out there and creating those networks, I think, is a really important part. And not just taking it all on show, not just saying I need to be the
Mm.
stoic rock who absorbs everything around me and just plows on and carries on doing it because that's what masculinity is about.
Mm.
Be more open to collaborating with other fathers, other mothers, other carers, and
Mm.
getting what you want. Part of that is tapping into, ultimately thinking about, who do you want to be, what do you want to do, and what do you want to have. If you can
Yeah.
if you can understand what those three elements are, and it's something I do at the start of all coaching engagements with my
Mm.
clients, is to help them to understand what those three things
Things
look like.
are. Yeah.
Things flow from there. If that's your, that's your kind of, that's your platform, everything, measure everything from there. But you've got to do some of the work yourself, but don't just let it slip.
Yeah.
Get out there,
No.
talk to people, work out what's possible.
It is, and if they find that they're struggling, to seek help, really, wouldn't it? Because I mean, that's it's too hard to, you think you're just going to kind of plow on and ignore some of these things and these stresses and these pressures, and they just build up, don't you? And I think your point
Yeah.
about having a network is fantastic, because you're right. People support people, don't they? And you're stronger to, as we keep hearing with COVID, we're better together.
Yeah.
But it's true, isn't it? Because just having that additional perspective, or getting help from someone like yourself as a coach that can just guide you through some of these questions and help you to explore,
Mm.
what you actually really want from your life, and what's most important, and what is it you need to do to make that happen, or is key. Ian, this has been absolutely brilliant. Is there anything else that you're working on, or that I should kind of signpost people to
What
at the
am I
moment?
working on? So yeah, every week at the moment, then a episode of Lockdown Dads comes out.
Okay.
So if you go to inspiringdads.co.uk,
Yep.
big red button in the top corner, it says podcast. So there's
Mm.
regular weekly content. We've this week, or when I finish doing the show notes, it's due out today. So by the time you've got this, it'll already be out. But today is
Okay.
Elliot Ray from Music Football Fatherhood, who we interviewed on Friday. But yeah, James Miller and I, we do things every week on that. I guess the other thing is, if you're watching this I do talks and presentations. I've got a presentation slide deck that gets modified. It's post-COVID friendly in terms of shining a light on the importance of supporting men as a route to gender equality, because that's my big thing. It is all about supporting and coaching dads, stressed dads, to balance work and fatherhood, but it's not just in a vacuum. And I think that's really important, is that a lot of the benefits are gained certainly from an equality perspective, are gained by taking a little bit more care over how we support our new dads in particular.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. And I will obviously post links, because I'm assuming that your website is probably, or LinkedIn is probably the two best ways to contact you if people
Yeah.
wanted to find any more information out about how
Yep.
to work with you. Great.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Okay, I will post all that information in the post when I share the recording. Ian, thank you so much again for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge and your male energy today. I really appreciate it. It's
Thanks.
fantastic. It's fantastic. And I will see you soon. Thanks very
Bye.
much for
Bye.
listening. Bye.
Thanks, Chris.